At AT&T, everyone deserves our best deal. Like the new Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra for $0. With Galaxy AI, new and existing customers can get the new Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra for $0 with eligible trade-in, any condition.
Give it up for the very funny Key and Lara.
I don't think you can have too many pairs of jeans. I have 1 slim fit, 2 regular, 3 wide leg, 4 super skinny.
It's a really big deal. $25 men and women's denim. Kids, toddler, and baby styles, $12 to $15. And Sunday.
Yes, JCPenney.
No one. Literally no one. Oh, come on. You gotta be kidding me. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory. Call it nostalgia, call it a return to a more innocent time, call it a desire to trend right off of PewDiePie's success playing the game that just overthrew Fortnite. Rest in peace, Jurgen. But I have been digging through a lot of Minecraft lore lately. Oh, and you absolutely heard that right. According to Google Trends, Minecraft is now on top of Fortnite, both in terms of web search and here on YouTube. It's like the Grover Cleveland of video games. And by that I mean a game that was king, gave up its crown to someone else, but then snatched it back, just like old Grover C. did when he was elected president. History's only double president, for that matter. Honestly, it's like the only thing Grover Cleveland's known for. Heck, this 10 fascinating facts article on him couldn't even come up with anything remotely interesting, let alone fascinating. What was I talking about again? Oh yeah, Minecraft, on the other hand, is endlessly fascinating, because for a game that's now 10 years old, happy anniversary by the way, its lore still hasn't been cracked. Oh sure, there's plenty of speculation and lots of really good ideas, but to my knowledge, no one has truly been able to piece together a final, all-encompassing, all mysteries of this world tied together lore solve. And so today, I don't really plan on doing that. I'm not even gonna pretend. I'm starting to learn that people take it really seriously when I say stuff like, today we're solving this. So let me instead say this quite honestly to you. I'm gonna do my best to start us on a journey to solve this thing. I want to start a conversation with all of you where we can pool our knowledge and figure this out together. I want to put together my thoughts on pieces of evidence that stood out as particularly interesting to me, propose to you what I interpret that to mean, and then leave further discussion in our collective communal hands. It's a theory. It's always a theory. And like any theory, it's meant to be discussed, analyzed, criticized, added to, tested. And because it's a theory about video games, it's meant most importantly of all to be fun. And if along the way we solve some deep-seated lore mysteries, great, more power to us. These games at the end of the day are puzzles to solve. And so I'm gonna do my best to lead that charge in solving those puzzles. But I want you to be there with me every step of the way. And so our first step when it comes to solving Minecraft is tackling the Enderman. Originally programmed into the game as a joking reference to Slender Man, these tall, dark, and handsome creatures, well, just tall and dark, I guess, have become the cornerstone upon which all other lore in this game is built. Solving what the Endermen are is essential if we have any hope of truly coming to the definitive solution as to the hidden backstory of this game. And after exploring the design of survival mode, the gameplay decisions, even ancillary canonical content in books like the Ma Bestiary, surprise, surprise, I have myself a theory as to what they actually are. Admittedly, it's not a new theory, but what it lacks for in originality, it more than makes up for in evidence and observation. It is my proposal to you today that the Endermen aren't aliens, they're not ghosts. I almost thought that they were insects, but that one didn't pan out. No, what they are is human. They're brilliant humans. Humans who were in trouble, a literal fight for their lives and needed an escape. But in the process, they suffered a horrific fate, reducing them to the moaning shadows of a fallen civilization that they are now. So, in the true spirit of Minecraft, let's start building ourselves a theory, shall we? What do we know about these creatures? Well, first, we know that they're one of the game's neutral mobs, meaning that they're not going to attack you unless they're actively provoked. This is already interesting because it means that, in many ways, they come in peace. I mean, look at the list of mobs and all of their behavior patterns. Anything else that's nice to you is either an animal, a villager, or a zombie pigman, which is weird and honestly merits an episode of its own for another day. Everything, and I mean everything else, is hostile, except for the Endermen. So already there's a bit of an odd, tenuously peaceful relationship between us and the Endermen, but it gets even weirder when you consider consider that they're the only other creatures other than Steve or Alex able to move blocks. Sure, they're kinda picky about what blocks they pick up, but carrying blocks is an ability only shared between our character and the Enderman. As the mob bestiary says, quote, "They will not just pick up any block, but will choose only clay, dirt and sand, flowers and other plants, and rather oddly, TNT. Some claim the Enderman is indulging in a form of play or attempting to communicate." Speaking of communication, we also know that they can talk, or at least had the ability to talk. Listen to some of the sound clips from when Endermen are idling near you.
My face hurts from laughing. Heart emoji. Heart emoji. Aww.
The best group chats happen in real life.
Emoji. He's so funny. I love you guys.
If you have tried multiple oral antidepressants,
You hear it? There's clearly a language here, a real language that we as humans can understand. Listen again. You should be hearing, hey, hello. This next one is really clear. What's up? And look for the eye, which presumably is referencing Eyes of Ender, the items that allow you to find strongholds where they're used to activate a portal to the end, home of the Enderman and the game's final boss, the Ender Dragon. So we have ourselves neutral creatures who are able to move blocks, just like us, and have language abilities far beyond what we hear elsewhere in the game from characters like the villagers. It's certainly a lot of odd similarities to be sure, but far from airtight evidence that the Endermen are somehow related to men. But now let's take a minute to actually look at their home, the End. The End is a weird final dimension for Minecraft. It honestly feels to me like where the game started to run out of money. Not that it could ever run out of money, with the whole thing just being a bunch of endstone and purple blocks, ugly purples and yellows everywhere, huge chunks of landscape missing, and giant cities that you can visit far off in the distance, all of which are eerily empty. This is the home of the Enderman, sure, even the mob bestiary says it, but look closer and you see that while the Endermen may call this dimension home, and they certainly wander around in the empty open landscapes, these giant looming Thanos purple buildings aren't for them. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look inside the End cities. There's tons of great loot hidden all over the place. Inside the chests, you can find everything from enchanted swords to saddles and armor for your horse. The Minecraft Gamepedia breaks down everything that we can find here, but something's wrong with that list. None of these items are actually useful to the Endermen. They don't wear armor, they don't attack with swords, and they certainly don't ride animals. Heck, there are no animals in the End to ride. Even the fact that the items are kept in chests should be a huge red flag here. Remember, Endermen are only picking up certain blocks, and none of those blocks entail chests. They can't use these things or the thing that stores those things. All of this points to the idea that the End's cities weren't built by the Endermen. They were built by and for someone else. Some other ancient people who managed to get to the End, but who? When you start up a new survival mode game, you enter a blank world. Immediately you notice that you're the only one of your kind. Oh, sure, as you adventure, you'll come across NPCs like the villagers, but they're not like you. They don't look like you. They can't build like you. You and the villagers are fundamentally different. It's almost as if you're a different species. This fact is even supported by zombie attacks. When bit, a villager doesn't transform into a normal zombie. It turns specifically into a zombie villager. Regular zombies and zombie villagers are different. In fact, the only times that you ever really see anything that looks even remotely like you, it's always in the form of undead enemies. Zombies, drowned, husks. It implies that once upon a time there were other humans here, but they all died en masse. It's a strange detail that you probably noticed, but you shrug it off and you continue on your journey. Then you start discovering pre-existing structures, mine shafts, temples in the desert, monuments underwater, all abandoned, all of them lost to time. Again, you're the only person who can build things in this world, and you certainly didn't build any of these things, so where did they come from? Making things even more suspicious is the fact that ruins like desert temples are protected by cleverly designed booby traps, elaborate fake floors complete with pressure plates and grids of TNT. It all points to one thing: an advanced society of builders once lived in the overworld, but have since disappeared. So that begs the question, where did they go? Maybe they all died, which in turn led to the armies of the undead mobs that we have to guard against every night. And while I certainly think that that's part of it, it's not the whole story. Because we know that they went somewhere, teleported somewhere, and while they could have gone any number of places, we know for a fact that one of the places they ended up was the end. How can we be so sure?
Pizza Hut right now is offering any large pizza for just $10. Just download the Pizza Hut app now.
What is that?
It's called light.
Find your fun again. Carnival is calling.
Strongholds. Strongholds are the hidden ancient ruins that contain massive portals to the end. Whatever this ancient society was, they were so advanced that they could figure out how to build these things, which in turn makes them more advanced than even you, the player. In survival mode, you can't craft the end frames necessary to construct this thing. In order to travel to the end, you must find these portals hidden within the stronghold. And let's stop there for a minute. I mean, have you ever thought to question that name? Stronghold? It's a pretty odd choice. Personally, I would think it to be like the portal room, or the gateway room, or the altar, or something, anything like that. But instead, the designers of Minecraft named it Stronghold, a term that refers to a highly secure structure built for defending against attacks. And there's that idea again, an ancient civilization of advanced builders that was quickly dying. A group of builders, just like our player, who were being threatened in the overworld and needed an escape. And what they created was a portal to another dimension, the end, where, wouldn't you know it, they built cities to store the items and armor from their previous world. But there was one thing that they didn't expect, that this would be a one-way trip, that the portal would close up behind them, leaving them stranded in a strange and barren wasteland. Sure, they were safe from whatever was killing them in the overworld, but now they were trapped in a wasteland guarded by an unstoppable dragon, and they came unprepared. Based on what we see in the chests, they came in with swords and armor and horses. Effective weapons to be sure, but not against an otherworldly foe. A giant foe that flies around and attacks with towering beacons that restore its health. They couldn't defeat this thing, hence why it's still living when we arrive. And as we know from the game, the only way out of the end is through defeating the Ender Dragon. And since they couldn't, they were stuck, trapped there for generations. They learned to live in harmony with the dragon. They make a new life with whatever limited resources they have there, building homes using the strange end stones and purple blocks. They run out of food and soon have nothing to eat, so they turn to the strange chorus fruits found there. Chorus fruits, which, funny enough, have teleportation properties. And over time, they begin to change. They adapt to their new surroundings. Oh sure, they retain some human features. According to the diagrams in the mob bestiary, their brains are very human-like, and they have the flat faces and wide eyes indicative of humans. They still do vaguely look like our player character, but they evolve to grow taller, which makes picking the tall stalks of chorus fruit easier. Similar to how giraffes' necks got longer to more easily reach higher up leaves. The fruit's teleportation abilities starts to rub off on them. So instead of having to rely on ender pearls to teleport around, they instead naturally gain the ability from their diet. Over time, they slowly forget their ability to build. I mean, why build when there's no escape, when there's not even many resources with which to craft? But they still retain the ability to pick up blocks. Though their skill for speech gets forgotten, they do retain a rudimentary language, still speaking in those distorted words. This once great builder society slowly, generation after generation, transforms into the Endermen. Even some of their memories may still remain. One odd detail of the Endermen is that wearing a pumpkin on your head prevents them from becoming aggressive. Maybe it reminds them, somewhere deep down, of a simpler time, or of the friendly golems that they would construct back on the overworld. Regardless, the civilization is stuck there. Oh sure, some are able to teleport out into the overworld or into the nether, but most are forced to live there, under the rule soul of the dragon. And we know this isn't by choice, because when you finally arrive in the end, when you finally defeat their oppressor, the achievement we receive is Free the End. The Endermen at this point are so far gone from the people they once were that they're no longer able to appreciate what's happened, but in defeating the dragon, you as the player have brought closure to this oppressed civilization, one that was forced to flee to a new dimension in order to survive, only to wind up trapped yet again. And that, my friends, is the story of Minecraft. You're a builder, and you follow in the path of the great builders who came before you, discovering their work, learning of their enemies, unlocking their technology, and ultimately freeing them from their greatest oppressor. Now, admittedly, there are some difficult things to explain here, like how this ancient civilization got access to the Ender Pearls necessary to craft the Eyes of Ender required to build a portal to the end if they themselves become the Endermen. It would require some sort of time loop, which honestly there isn't a whole lot of evidence for. Instead, my thought here is that the Ender Pearls are items that they learn to create before becoming Endermen, before going to the end. I mean, think about this. We know that this ancient civilization was able to access the Nether. End Rods and Eyes of Ender both require blaze-related materials to craft. So this civilization had definitely visited that dimension, and thus knew how to access the powers of teleportation. So maybe they learned how to harness that in a smaller, portable form, i.e. the Ender Pearl, before ever making it to the end? I'm not 100% sure. It's honestly just speculation to try and solve for this theory's biggest problem. Anyway, I want to know, what do you think? Did you like it? Did you not? Let's build it out from there. Why do they hate Endermites? Where'd the villagers come from? And seriously, what is the deal with the zombie pigman civilization? Like I said, the Endermen are just the start to the puzzle that is Minecraft, but there is still plenty more here for us to discover. So until then, remember, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. And hey, if you enjoyed that, start picking away at the box on the left to check out my video on what Minecraft creepers really are. It's an older video and it's more scientific, but it's one of my favorites. Or heck, chip away at the box on the right to watch as I prove that Minecraft's block world is actually round. I'll see you all next weekend for that FNAF episode you requested. Joy.
Watch it!
Any pizza with any toppings for just $9.99 is Domino's best deal ever. Translation for basketball fans, it's
Since the beginning, there's been one mystery long unanswered in the world of Minecraft. One set of game design decisions so creepy, so disturbing, that they feel like they come from a completely different game. It's a riddle that, once solved, exposes more of the hidden lore that's buried deep inside this world. Today we're covering the mystery of the broken discs 11 and 13. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory! Can you dig it? So, last Minecraft episode, we started an epic quest. Well, everyone else gets to play around with their giant meatballs and deadly skyboxes. Here we are doing the important work, solving the hidden lore that's buried inside this game. Because it is there! I started to prove that last time, and it is just waiting to be unlocked by us. I asked all of you to send me your theories, and you did. The response was overwhelming, with hundreds of new theories posted in the comments, as well as over on the Game Theorist subreddit. Everything from the origins of the pigmen to the literally burning questions of the Nether. Keep them coming, guys. In full transparency, I'm still reading through them, and I'm working on compiling all the information to see where we go to next. But today, I actually wanted to tackle a Minecraft mystery that always bugged me personally, and one that I didn't see many theorists actually talking about when I made the call for theories. Today, I want to talk about the music discs. For those of you who don't know, music discs are unique items found randomly in chests that can be played in jukeboxes to, you know, liven up what's otherwise a very quiet, serene game. No, not that. The music discs are something to really set the mood. Wrong mood, guys. Perfect. These discs can also be dropped by creepers when they're killed by arrows shot from either a skeleton or a stray. It's an odd spawn mechanic, but alright, we'll just go with it. Let that beat drop, creeper! Literally, creeper, let it drop. You don't even have hands. How can you be holding this thing in the first place? Other than that, though, there's really no other way to obtain them. They can't be crafted, after all. Now, all of that isn't particularly interesting, right? But where this goes from just being another item to a full-on gaming creepypasta is right here. Discs 11 and 13. You see, most music discs in the game have fairly innocuous names in music, like Blocks, Mall, and Cat. One of the first two music discs ever added into the game, but along with Cat, there was one other, simply titled 13. And unlike all the other ambient chill-out music, this one was, well, it was unsettling. Outside of it not having a name and also being numbered after what many consider to be an unlucky or evil number, so much so that airplanes and hotels don't even have 13th rows and floors. Fun fact, check it out next time you're in a hotel or an airplane. 13 also cuts off abruptly right in the middle of the track.
You could be vaping formaldehyde, which is used in taxidermy.
Oh dear.
What?
Formaldehyde. Oh dear.
What?
I knew it. Oh dear, oh dear.
What?
Aren't you an elk? I don't know what I am.
Considering AT&T, good call. AT&T offers you great deals and great connection because they're the GOAT. When you compare, there's no comparison. Right, bud?
And when it comes back, we're suddenly hit with echoey, otherworldly noises, leading many people to assume that this was a record left by the alien-like Enderman. But then the mystery got even deeper. When version 1.0.0 came out, 9 more music tracks were added to the game, with yet another disc going unnamed. This time, it was disc 11. And where number 13 was mildly unsettling, 11 outright screams to us that we're not in the overworld anymore, friends, starting right off the bat with desperate running, heavy breathing, and coughing. And here all along, I thought that Minecraft was for kids. Can you imagine finding this as a child playing this game, putting it on the jukebox, being excited to hear what you just found, and then what? You suffer from PTSD because of what you hear. Actually, I probably don't even have to ask you to imagine this sort of thing. I'm sure many of you watching probably had that exact same experience when you were playing the game as a kid. Bring in the cuboidal nightmares.
I fear no man, but that thing.
Adding to the mystery, 11 is broken, shattered to pieces. These 2 discs led many people to conclude one of 2 things. Either they were documenting someone who was attacked by Endermen, or they were of someone being chased around by Herobrine, the ghostly glitch that many say haunted the game's code in the early days of mining and crafting. But that's largely where the discussion of these things stopped. Guesses. To my knowledge, no one has truly taken a scientific look at analyzing these 2 discs to try and uncover the mysteries that they contain. So today I am doing exactly that, using a combination of audio analysis, visualization tools, metagame analysis, and just good old logic to try and end the childhood nightmare that was these 2 discs. And in the process, I'm hoping that what we find continues to unravel the mysteries of the deeper lore hidden within this game's files. Now, before we get into any deep analysis of the audio itself, I want to start by actually analyzing these soundtracks visually. As many of you may remember from my video on the Fortnite Season 5 ARG, it's relatively easy to hide clues within audio files, but sometimes those clues aren't necessarily ones you're gonna hear. Oftentimes, they're ones that you're gonna see. They're called spectrograms, visual representations of the frequencies that you're hearing in a sound file. It's a technique that we've actually used a lot when creating clues for our Game Theorist ARG. Weird sounding audio files like this that, when changed into a visual format, give you everything from web addresses to secret passwords like this. Wait, what is this? What's this code? I wonder where that could lead to. Yeah, that's it, 7.
Is that?
Yeah. I'm gonna ask.
That is so rude. Don't bother her.
I gotta ask.
V7. No way. No way! I can't believe it! New back-to-school game theory merch? Wow! This book's laptop toy ones. And that's not all. We've got ourselves a hard-shell pencil case perfect for keeping your favorite art supply, crafting your digging a hole. Heck, it even top line. Where was I? Oh yeah, discs 11 and 13. Discs 11 and 13, while they are certainly creepy sound files, they're not filled with the types of sounds that would make me immediately think to put them through a spectrogram. However, there was one finding that I wanted to put to the test for today's theory because I was kind of skeptical about the results that they had. A French Minecrafter named Bcidro supposedly made a spectrogram of the sound files and said that he found both a creeper face and the numbers 12418 hidden inside. It sounded like a lot of fake news to me, and the screenshots that were circulating the internet just felt a bit too perfect, a bit too Photoshop-y feeling for me, so I redid the whole spectrograph test using my own tools, and this is what I found. It was 100% true. This wasn't just a bunch of karma fodder, something cool that someone made up to try and get people's upvotes. The images are actually there, hidden within the sound file. But then what does it mean? Well, interestingly enough, the numbers appear to be a secret signature inserted in there by the music's producer. Minecraft's music was produced by a man named Daniel Rosenfeld, better known online as C418. And wouldn't you know it, but the numbers 1, 2, 12 in hexadecimal code or hex code translates to the letter C. Thus we have 12418 actually being a code for C418, his online name. The creeper face, meanwhile, well, it's a creeper face. Maybe these tracks are less made by the Enderman and more a product of our little moss bombs. To know for sure though, we have to keep digging. To continue being good little AV club members here, we're gonna need the A to go along with the V that we just analyzed, hopefully giving us a clearer picture of what exactly is going on. So let's play this thing, starting where it all began, disc 13. Here's a copyright neutral clip.
Changing how you shop can feel like a lot.
Okay, so obviously this takes place in a cave. We have sounds that are echoing, reverberating with wet dripping sounds and chimes. But we don't just have to speculate about this. What we're hearing in Disc 13 are very clearly cave ambience sounds. The ones specifically programmed into the game to play when you're in a dark, eerie, underground place. Here's a moment from Disc 13. And here's one of the matching cave ambience tracks. But it goes even further. Nowadays in Minecraft, there are 19 different cave ambience tracks. But back when Disc 13 was first introduced, guess how many there were? 13. 13 isn't just a spooky number here, it's a reference to the number of cave ambience sounds that existed in the game. But what else are we hearing here? Well, at 143, there's the faint sound of a creeper hiss and explosion echoing through the cave. Here's the clip. And here's that iconic sound as we usually hear it in the game. It's immediately followed by the sound of someone falling into water and then staggering out. You can almost hear their footsteps. What it seems to suggest is a caver exploring a cave, running into a creeper, and then having to jump into a pool of water to avoid the ensuing explosion. He gets out, slightly injured, and then tries to find a place to hide. But there are two other audio clues here that are worth mentioning. The first happens at the 1 minute mark. You can actually hear faint sounds of arrows being shot. Here's the audio. And here's the sound effect in game. But while we hear two arrows being shot, we actually only hear one of them land in the ground. The other one remains silent, which suggests that it hit its target. Now, what mob is found in caves and also happens to fire arrows? Skeletons. Now, remember something that I mentioned before. The music discs are found either in chests or via a very random mechanic of a skeleton's stray arrow going on and killing a creeper. And what do we have in Disc 13? In this one audio disc, we have a creeper exploding and a mob firing arrows at us. The reason creepers drop music discs when hit by skeletons or stray arrows, it's a reference to Disc 13. The last thing worth noting here is the cutoff that I mentioned earlier. The disc stops abruptly after the arrows fire and picks up as the creeper starts hissing. It's a cutoff that's not only unsettling, but one that, wouldn't you know it, also happens at exactly 1 minute and 30 seconds into the track. 1-3, Disc 13. Oh yeah. And wouldn't you know it, but the creeper starts to hiss exactly 13 seconds after that cutoff. Slow clap, Daniel, slow clap. You use that number 13 to its fullest here. So those are all fun little Easter eggs, but why is it cut off? What are we missing? Well, for that, let's turn to Disc 11, which is, quite honestly, a bit more straightforward. Somebody is running on stone, uses some metallic object that clicks, then uses a paper object based on the rustling we hear, before finally running away, first on stone and then either on dirt or gravel.
What is that?
It's called light.
Find your fun again. Carnival is calling.
Need better sleep? We can help. Visit Mattress Firm now and upgrade to a Tempur-Pedic and get a $300.
Throughout the audio, though, we have a disturbing addition. Coughing and heavy breathing. Human coughing. Sounds that feel very out of place in our perfect little block world. And then it just cuts off. No words, no music, no explanation. Just cuts off at the 1 minute and 11 mark. 1 minute and 11 seconds. You don't get a second slow clap. But seriously, it's no wonder these things became a creepypasta in their own right. To throw something like this into a game that has a massive audience of 9-year-olds, and suddenly this becomes a complete horror show. Even as an adult, this feels like it belongs more in my creepy film theory episodes than in the realm of Diamond Minecart and Captain Sparkles. But okay, let's start working on identifying some of those mysterious sounds. It turns out that the easiest way to narrow down what we're actually hearing isn't audio analysis, it's game analysis. We know the metallic clicking has to be flint and steel by process of elimination. Disc 11 was officially added as a music disc on July 30th, 2010. Other metallic objects were actually added later, like the compass, which was introduced later that year in September, whereas flint and steel has been present in the game before it even had a numbering system. The same is true for the paper object. It can't be a map since maps didn't appear in the game until much later, April 27th, 2011, a full year after the disc was introduced, meaning that our caver would have to be using either paper or a book of some form. So he lights himself a fire and presumably starts writing on the paper or book, almost as if he's keeping a journal. And wouldn't you know it, but throughout Minecraft's extended lore, we have ourselves multiple instances of historians who document their findings in this world via journal of some sort. My last episode on Enderman, for instance, talked a lot about the Mob Bestiary, which was one such book written from the perspective of an explorer in this world. And more recently, in July of 2019, we got ourselves Minecraft The Lost Journals, a novel which literally has ripped torn pages from an explorer named Nicholas who finds and gets trapped in locations like the Nether. Perhaps this person that we're hearing in the audio files is Nicholas. There's no really solid evidence to that, but it could very well be. Or perhaps any of the authors of any of the journals that exist in the Minecraft extended universe. We can't quite be sure who it is, but we can be sure that these two discs connect with each other. They're telling the same story. Despite there being less reverb in Disc 11, we know that it's also taking place in a cave based on the types of blocks our adventurer is running on. Dungeons contain cobble and mossy cobble. Strongholds didn't exist back then, and we're not hearing ourselves any grass, only stone and dirt, meaning that probability says it's most likely a cave. Could it be the same cave that we heard back in Disc 13? Well, when you look at the events, it seems to continue the story that was set up in Disc 13. Disc 11 slots in perfectly at the breakpoint that we hear in Disc 13. Our cave explorer gets attacked by arrows from a skeleton at the beginning of 13. The audio breaks, but when we pick up back in Disc 11, we hear him running away, presumably escaping the arrows to a safe area where he can light a fire and record the findings in his journal. However, he's caught off guard by a creeper that causes him to get up and run away, and as we hear back when Disc 13 picks back up again, explodes, resulting in him jumping into water at the last minute to avoid the explosion. We end our little vignette here with him trying to find some place to hide and dry off. Heck, perhaps that's even why Disc 11 is shattered in the first place. It broke during the explosion with the creeper, or during our caver's fall. And that, my fellow miners and crafters, seems to be the story of Disc 11 and 13. A story of creepers and skeletons, and why music discs spawn that way. A story of journalists who are lost underground in caves. A story of broken records and hidden visual Easter eggs. But what's most interesting of it all is that it confirms a part of my last theory. The belief that there was an ancient civilization of builders present here in these games before we arrived. People who came before us. No, these discs weren't created by Endermen, but perhaps more unsettling, they were made by men, humans, who aren't here any longer. A race of people who tried to explore, document, and understand the mysteries of this world, but didn't survive long enough to pass their knowledge on to us. Their journals are lost, their records are broken, their structures are left empty. Sure, discs 11 and 13 might not be as creepy as we once believed them to be when we were younger playing this game, but they allude to something much more dire, an existential dread. This cave explorer is gone, without a trace. His people are gone, vanished into thin air, and now we're here, alone, and putting together the lost pieces of this civilization. Could the same thing that happened to them happen to us? But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. New merch.
Trying to predict the future is a hazardous occupation. The only thing we can be sure of is that it will be...
Here's a mini theory to start things off. Endermites. What are they? They're the smallest hostile mob in the game, and they're one of the very few creatures to possess the moniker of Ender. But to me, the weirdest detail about them is that they don't get along with the Endermen. When confronted with each other, they just attack. it's a strange little detail to include since so many of the other spawns in the end aren't hostile towards one another. But now, consider this. What if endermites are actually silverfish? The obnoxious little gray bugs that bother you up in the overworld. What if endermites are just silverfish who went through an end portal, or ate themselves a bunch of chorus fruit when they were out there in the end, or whatever? The proof here is actually surprisingly substantial. Cue up the checklist. Point number 1, both endermites and silverfish are small. In fact, they're both so small that they'll suffocate to death in the sinking depths of soul sand. They're the only 2 hostile mobs where this sort of thing happens. Speaking of their size, not only are they both small, technically speaking, they're exactly the same size. According to Minecraft Gamepedia, both creatures are 0.3 blocks tall and 0.4 blocks wide. In fact, they're so similar that an early design of the endermites was just that of silverfish. You can just see it right here on screen right now. The design was eventually changed during Java Edition 1.8, but for a while there, the 2 looked almost identical. Now, I know what you're thinking. That just means that they're recolored assets. It doesn't necessarily make them the same creature, but think again. To understand exactly why, we need to look at the enchantment Bane of Arthropods. If we're being honest, Bane of Arthropods is pretty lame as far as enchantments go. Sure, it increases your attack damage, but it only works when fighting against one of 4 very specific mobs in the game, and 2 of those mobs are spiders, so 50% are supposedly diverse creatures in this universe, and those 2 happen to be silverfish and endermites. Meaning that at the very least, they're in the same taxonomic phylum. AP Biology, what? But here's the kicker. The only way to get to the end is through portals that are hidden in strongholds deep underground, right? No big surprise there. But look into how strongholds are generated, and you notice something interesting. They always have to have a portal room. That makes sense since they're the primary place that you find the portal to the end game. But the 2 features required of that portal room, obviously the portal, but also a silverfish spawner. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you, but this to me reads like the criminals returning to the scene of the crime. So why don't Endermen and Endermites get along? Well, if my last theory was correct about Endermen being an ancient race of builders, then one of their old foes would have been the silverfish. Silverfish who are in the perfect position to leap through end portals at the same time as these ancient builders. And so now, hundreds of generations and 1 end portal later, that battle is still being waged. New names, new faces, but the same old enemies. But hey, that's just a theory. A mini theory! And I'm just getting started. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that, yes, does indeed still talk about games, and not just why platforms need to respect their smaller creators, or why claiming video games causing violence is short-sighted. The reason I call out both those episodes, by the way, is that both of them underperformed. One even got itself demonetized, but they're, in my honest opinion, 2 of the most important episodes that we've ever done on the channel. So if you happen to miss either one of those, which there's a high likelihood that you did, please give them a watch after this video. Link is at the upper right corner of the screen, that old iCard. Put that YouTube feature to use. But today, we're not talking about those episodes. Instead, I'm looking to build on another theory. One that you all seem to like. One that started us down the path towards deciphering the hidden lore of Minecraft. Because there is lore here. It's not all giant golden Wang monuments off in the distance. But unlike most other games, Minecraft's lore isn't told through dialogue and cutscenes. Instead, it's communicated through subtle design choices. Spawn conditions, character designs, achievement names, hostile versus friendly behavioral patterns, and all of that will be important today as we explore the secrets of the Wither. Because last time we looked at the end of the Minecraft story, today we're talking about how it all began. So in case you missed it, or just forgot, during my last major Minecraft theory, we tallied up the evidence suggesting that Endermen are actually an evolved form of an ancient race of builders. They speak English, they're able to hold rudimentary blocks. It would explain why strongholds are called strongholds in the first place, and why mysterious structures like underwater monuments and old mine shafts are left abandoned, dotted around the overworld when no other living creature in this universe has neither the ability to mine nor craft. The theory also explains the origins of end cities, and why they contain abandoned chests full of supplies totally inappropriate for life in that hostile purple environment. There's obviously a lot more, but you should just go watch that theory if you're interested. Link is in the didgeridoo. Anyway, one key element I was speculating about in that theory was what motivated this ancient race of people to wind up in the end in the first place. They seem like they were fleeing to it, but why? Curiosity? An accident? I ultimately conclude that it was to escape something. Some big threat that existed out there in the overworld. Now, obviously, the overworld is populated with zombies and creepers and skeletons, but that just doesn't seem like enough to warrant building out a massive underground fortress deep down near the bedrock. No, after doing the research, it's my belief that these ancient builders accidentally summoned the Wither, which proceeded then to decimate their established society, killing them off by the hundreds until they somehow managed to flee to the end and escape. Now, why would I say this? Well, first and foremost, let's look at the achievement list, shall we? When we defeat the Ender Dragon, we get ourselves the End achievement, and that makes a lot of sense, right? It's the quote-unquote final boss of the game after all. It cues the end credits, you're in a place literally called the End. It's an achievement name that totally works. But for summoning the Wither, you actually get the exact opposite, the Beginning. A question mark. And then after its defeat, you get yourself the Beginning again, but this time it's with a period. It's a definitive statement that directly parallels how the Ender Dragon achievements are handled, but with one problem. The Wither can be summoned at any time, and it very often happens after the dragon has been killed. It's not the beginning of really anything in this game. I was tempted to think that maybe it's the beginning of a new adventure post Ender Dragon, but again, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense since summoning and defeating the Wither is completely optional in the story. And if and when you do it, nothing much comes of it, really. It gives you a Nether Star, which, for as special and unique as that item is, just allows you to build a beacon that shoots lame buffs into the surrounding area. It's not all that cool or all that meaningful. But what if the Wither was the beginning in a different way? What if it's the beginning of the story for the ancient builders that started all this in motion in the first place? Look for a moment at the strongholds. They're buried super deep underground, like absurdly deep, and with literally no trace of their existence on the surface. They're like bomb shelters, safety bunkers. But they're defending against what? Zombies? Creepers? I don't think so. You don't go to that extreme just to defend against a regular mob, but a fearsome creature like the Wither that spreads death and decay to anything in its sights? Absolutely. Especially since we know that the Wither flies and also destroys any block that it touches. Your best way to avoid a creature like this is gonna be by digging down, far below where it can reasonably follow. Exactly what we find with the stronghold placement. In fact, it would explain why the only remaining structures from these ancient builders on the surface of the overworld are underwater monuments, underground mine shafts, and secluded desert temples. They're the only structures that the Wither wasn't likely to touch and immediately destroy. And on that note, what's the key feature that exists inside of a stronghold? Well, it's a portal to the end. Now, we just established that the Wither can destroy almost any block that it touches. Almost any block being the operative word there. There are very few exceptions to things that it can destroy. Those exceptions include bedrock, command blocks, extended pistons, and end portal blocks and end portal frames. I don't know about you, but if my society is being decimated and I'm trapped in my underground bunker running away from this terrible beast that destroys everything it touches, I'm making sure that I'm building that last-ditch escape effort using supplies that are going to be Wither-proof. We also can be sure that the Wither was known by the ancient builders. If you look closely at the chiseled red sandstone that was used as decorations in ancient buildings like desert temples and underwater ruins, you'll notice a hieroglyphic that clearly depicts the Wither. Straight body, 3 skeletal heads. So whoever created these structures in the first place certainly knew that this thing existed. But how? Or maybe more importantly, why? Why would anyone intentionally try to summon this thing in the first place? Well, let's look at how it's built, shall we? The Wither requires 2 very interesting ingredients in order to be summoned. The first is soul sand, found throughout the Nether. Sand that's relatively unremarkable in every way. Oh yeah, except for it being composed of the souls of the damned. It's well known at this point that if you look at the pattern on soul sand close enough, you'll notice screaming faces staring right back at you. It's also why you get sucked down a bit when you're walking across it, almost like the lost souls are pulling you down into them, violently getting you to join them. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is me talking about Minecraft. Kid-friendly, brand approved. So ingredient number 1, 4 cubic meters of damned the souls. Check mark there. Secondly, you need 3 withered skeleton heads. But why these particular heads and not just any skeleton head? Well, to understand that, we need to find out what makes the wither skeleton so different from its brethren. You see, wither skeletons are exclusive to nether fortresses. This is worth noting because think about how crazy this is. We're basically in Minecraft's equivalent of HE double toothpicks, a world of ghasts and blazes, where everything fortresses. This is worth noting because think about how crazy this is. We're basically in Minecraft's equivalent of HE double toothpicks, a world of ghasts and blazes, where everything is set on fire and nothing can build. Heck, most of the enemy spawns here don't even have arms, and yet somehow there are fortresses here that are being supervised by large cursed skeletons. Fortresses, mind you, that contain chests full of gold and diamonds and iron, saddles and horse armor, all materials that aren't found down in the nether naturally, supplies that had to have been brought down there and left by the original people who constructed these things in the first place. The end city chests function much the same way, and once you know it, they also contain the same sorts of loot: iron and gold and diamonds and horse armor and saddles. Almost like it's the same people carrying their major supplies from place to place. So using this information, let me tell you a little story. An ancient race of builders descends into the nether to harvest its resources. They construct fortresses down there to defend against the hostile environment and store their supplies. But over time, as is natural, some of their ranks die. The nether is a dangerous and violent environment after all. So they bury their dead in the ground, but they don't realize that this place works differently than the overworld they're used to. What little soft ground there is actually sucks the soul out of the dead bodies, giving rise to soul sand, and leaving these bodies as just an undead husk of what they once were. It produces a wither skeleton, an aggressive, charred group of bones that, as an undead, lives on to complete the purpose it was given when it was alive: defend its fortress. Seeing all this, the Ancient Ones start to piece together an idea. If soul sand does indeed contain lost souls and somehow gives rise to the skeletons of the dead, maybe there's a way to combine the two and bring their dead friends back to life. These builders were a proud people. I mean, they were builders after all. Whatever they dreamed came into being from their very hands. They had conquered the earth, they had conquered the realms of heck. Now they would conquer the one thing impossible to any man: death. They would build life itself. I mean, with the raw materials, you can construct anything, right? Why not a lost human? You have the soul in the sand, you have the body in the wither skeleton. Why wouldn't it work? The last thing I'll call out here. You'll notice that none of the items in nether chests are enchanted, but by the time you get to the end, a lot of them are. The reason I call this out is that it shows an escalation in the way these ancient builders started using magic. By the time they end their journey in the end, they're full-blown magic users. They've started to go beyond just construction. They're starting to play with mystical forces. So, how does this story all work out? Well, it's a classic tale of hubris. The builders, having been to the fiery depths of heck, try to harness the ultimate resource, the power of life and death itself. They combine the soul and the body, the soul sand and the wither skeleton head, and it doesn't work. But by this point, they're obsessed. There has to be a way to make it work. Like so many other fictional characters before them, like Dr. Frankenstein, like the Elrics, they're convinced that they have the right ingredients, and so they start going down darker, more supernatural paths in their quest to crack the mystery. Magic, enchantment, potions. Maybe they go to the witches, already outcasts from society for their use of soul sand to concoct awkward potions and strange brews. And that's when they stumble upon it. They finally manage to create something, but it wasn't what they expected. Instead of bringing new life to a dead friend, they create a hideous and destructive beast, one out to punish them for tampering with the laws of nature itself. They make the Wither, an unstoppable force, a beast that, as we know, destroys the blocks that it touches and curses anything that gets in its way with decay. Gone overnight are the great buildings that this ancient race once constructed. The only things that remain standing are temples far out into the deserts, mine shafts hidden deep underground, monuments under the water. Gone are all the people of this once great society, one by one consumed by the Wither, a disease literally eating them away from the inside. Friends, neighbors, dead, decayed, or worse, brought back to life in the form of skeletons and zombies. The living undead that roam the landscape to this day. So for their own protection, the remaining ancient people hide underground, deep underground, down near the bedrock in fortified bases called strongholds, far below where the Flying Wither will be able to reach, with no trace of their existence on the surface. And it's there that they plan their escape. They've hopped to different realms before using portal technology. Why not again? But this time, the portal has to be made to be wither-proof, which is why end portal blocks are literally the only block type outside of bedrock immune to the Wither's attacks. And from there, we know the rest. They managed to make the portal and hop to the end, but it's a one-way trip. They don't realize that the portal won't be accessible behind them, and what awaits them on the other side is something else. Something completely unexpected. Something that may have even been worse. The Ender Dragon. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. Channel by Over. Money on again. Between disc. So, last Minecraft theory had me doing a lot of tree punching. And I have no doubt that me teaching you how to punch down a tree like you do in Minecraft inspired tens of thousands of you loyal theorists out there to try it for yourself, mowing down saplings faster than an overeager lumberjack. Which is why today, I want to start the episode by making amends. Theorists, it's time to stop the punching and start the planting. My friend Jimmy, you may have heard of him, he runs a channel called Mr. Beast, is a YouTuber that's looking to make a difference.
He's also from North Carolina. I'm from North Carolina.
Yes, they know that! Mr. Beast, alongside another friend of mine, the incredibly smart Mark Rober, are currently working to raise $20 million in order to plant 20 million trees by 2020. It's a very numerically sound thing. Anyway, it's in honor of Jimmy hitting 20 million subscribers, which, you know, good for him. Not jealous of that or anything. But anyway, I'll let Jimmy and Mark explain for themselves.
We went through a bunch of different options on how to pull this off and eventually settled with working with the Arbor Day Foundation. They're the largest, most well-respected nonprofit for planting trees, and we got them to agree that for every $1 we raise, they would plant 1 tree. That literally means if someone donates $3, 3 more trees will exist in the world than if they didn't.
It's pretty incredible, right? So if you'd like to be a part of this massive movement to make the world just a little bit greener, a donation link to the fund is in the top line of the description. 100% of your donation goes directly to the Arbor Day Fund, and every dollar is 1 more tree in the ground. If everyone who watches this video gives $1, well, I don't know how many people will watch this video, but you know, it's not a hard math problem to solve. It is literally multiplying by 1, so I trust you to be able to do the math in your head. Anyway, with that being said, and us making amends for all the trees that we punched down, it's time to talk zombie pigs. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, where, gotta be honest, I am still icing my knuckles after last week. Today, we're continuing our deep dive exploration into the lost lore of Minecraft by looking at what is, in my opinion, the strangest part of the universe, the zombie pigmen. And for me to call them out as the strangest is saying a lot, considering this is also a world full of living snowmen and laser-shooting pufferfish. Maybe it wouldn't be so strange if this was a mob that was only a bipedal pig creature that lived in HE-double toothpicks, but no, it has to be a zombified bipedal pig living in HE-double toothpicks that also carries around a butter sword for reasons, and also has no non-zombified versions of itself left anywhere on the planet. Now that is a weird collection of attributes, and if we're being 100% honest, it's probably because their origins are pretty bizarre. Tall, human-like pigs have been kicking around as an unused idea in Minecraft since the very beginning. A Minecraft user first came up with the idea for pigmen way back in 2010, and the game's creator Notch almost used them as the game's villagers a year later. It didn't happen. And in 2012, Notch revealed in the documentary Minecraft: The Story of Mojang that the game's signature creature, the Creeper, was also born out of awkwardly tall pig monsters.
Well, I mean, the Creepers were a mistake. I don't have any modeling programs to do the models, and I accidentally made them tall instead of log, so it was like a tall thing with 4 little feet. and that became the creeper. It was supposed to be a pig.
So if I were to guess, the zombie pigmen exist and are connected to creepers, villagers, and normal pigs purely because of a sequence of happy accidents, coding errors, and scrapped ideas that got eventually made into canon. But that's the real story for why zombie pigmen are probably in this game. What we're interested in is the fictional story. How can these creatures possibly fit into the shockingly deep and surprisingly cohesive lore of Minecraft that we've been building over the last couple of episodes? How do you fit undead pigs from HE-double hockey sticks into a tale about an ancient civilization of long-lost builders? I gotta be honest, this one started as I have no idea how we're gonna explain this, but by the end of my research, I think we got a pretty solid case here, friends. To start piecing together the lore of the zombie pigmen, we first have to look at their in-game behavior for clues. Now, obviously these creatures are most commonly associated with the Nether, but they can, on very rare occasions, appear in the overworld. When lightning strikes within 4 blocks of a pig, a zombie pigman will suddenly spawn. That immediately tells us that these two creatures are in some way connected. That the pigmen, at least at one point in their history, were related to normal, everyday pigs. We also know that the pigmen share some form of psychic link. Now, that might seem absurd to say, but their hostile behavior patterns confirm it. Attack one zombie pigman, and somehow all the others within a massive radius will become aggressive and converge on Steve. And it's not because they're hearing their attacked friend, since the sounds they make are relatively quiet. And everyone is still aggressive, even if that attack happens in a completely sealed off closed box that should deaden the sound to any outside listeners. The immediacy and aggression of their attack can only mean that they're linked in some way. And lastly, it's also important to note that they don't begin as hostile. They only turn hostile when they've been attacked. So under normal circumstances, they technically have nothing against Steve. It's only once Steve becomes aggressive that they suddenly have a reason to defend themselves. This admittedly gives us a lot to work with, but it's still just a bunch of loose threads without something to tie it all together. Any theory that I would craft to try and explain it all would be missing that linchpin of evidence that anchors the narrative. But then came this year's Minecon, the Mojang team's annual interactive livestream all about the Minecraft franchise, complete with discussions about upcoming features, big world premiere announcements, and lots of other stuff.
This is gonna look weird, but you can't hear. Hello.
Because you gotta juice that sweet, sweet watch time. And this year, between gooey hands and whatever this was, we received a ton of new information about what changes are rolling out into the Minecraft world over the next couple of months. Bees, honey blocks, target blocks. But of all the new content, it was the changes coming in Minecraft 1.6, the Nether update, that really caught my attention. Specifically, the new piglin civilization. Zombie pigmen are no more. Piglins and zombie piglins are here to stay.
Piglin is actually what we call the pigmen now. The piglin is almost like a new civilization that we add to the Nether.
But there was one detail about this mob in particular that caught my attention.
They are actually hostile towards the player. They also don't like wither skeletons.
They don't like wither skeletons, huh? That's an oddly specific detail for them to call out. From writing all of these episodes, I gotta say that so much of piecing together this game's story relies on picking apart spawn conditions and hostile behavioral patterns. Like in any good story, those sorts of details are telling you the relationships between our main characters, as it were. And so hearing Jeb call out the hostility towards one particular mob really stood out to me, especially since, as we established during our episode on the Wither skeletons are most likely the remains of the ancient builder race. There are plenty of reasons as to why, but I'm not gonna rehash them here. You can just watch that video if you're interested. But for the piglins to act violently towards wither skeletons, aka the ancient builders, that was the last detail that I needed. There's hostility between these two groups. Something happened long ago between these two civilizations, and it hasn't been forgotten, even long after both civilizations.
Considering AT&T, good call. AT&T offers you great deals and great connection because they're the GOAT. When you compare, there's no comparison. Right, bud?
Have largely died off. So let's start putting all these pieces together, shall we? We know that the ancient builders started in the overworld, and at some point they created a nether portal and started to explore down there. We know this based on the chests and the fortresses that exist down in the nether that could really have only been built by them. Now, here is where the piglins come in. At some point, the builders brought their pigs with them into this hostile environment. Again, we know this based on that lightning strike evidence. Pigs and zombie piglins are connected, and yet there are no pigs in the nether, meaning that they must have started in the overworld. Now, there's two possible reasons for the builders to do this. The first one is simple: food. The nether, up until the announcement of the new piglin beast mob, also coming with update 1.6, hasn't had a reliable source for food.
But it's also the food source in nether, actually. So when you get your food, you can't just have like a pretty little farm. Instead, you need to find this scary, aggressive piglin beast and get the food from there.
As such, any explorers looking to make a long journey to explore and forage in the area would need to bring a dedicated food source. Like, say, their stable of pigs. Bring them down to the nether, leave them there, and boom, you suddenly have pig-like creatures in a place where they have no business being. Option 2 for why the pigs would be down there is honestly a bit darker, and it could very well explain the hostility that exists between these two groups. Consider for a second if you had opened a portal to somewhere, some other dimension you don't really know. Are you just gonna hop through? Of course you're not. You're gonna test it. Most likely you're gonna test it on some sort of animal. And believe it or not, but pigs are often the ones being used as human stand-ins for large-scale scientific experiments because of their similar organ size and decay rates. So, to see whether things on the other side of that portal were safe, maybe the ancient builders dropped their pigs on through, sacrificing a few of them in the name of science. Either way, pigs are brought to the nether. And I don't know about you, but that would definitely give me a reason to hold a grudge against the people who brought me there, be they human or their undead wither skeleton forms. It also helps explain the wishy-washy aggressive feelings they have towards Steve. Zombie pigmen aren't aggressive towards Steve because he's not the one who brought them there. On the other hand, piglins are now aggressive towards Steve because, hey, he's a descendant of that ancient race of builders. So that explains how a pig-like species would get into this hostile supernatural environment and why they might be mad at the wither skeletons, but obviously it's skimming over a few teeny tiny details that might also need to be explained, like how they became walking, sword-wielding psychic warrior zombies. That's a pretty big logical leap to make there, right? Yeah. But, believe it or not, it's one that can be completely explained via netherwort. Remember what I said about the nether not having much food? Well, that's gonna be true for the animals down here too. I mean, really, what would a pig eat down there? Crops require water, and it's simply not possible to place water down in the nether. As such, the only thing that they're gonna be able to eat down there is netherwort. But if that were truly what the builders were feeding their primary food source, you would expect them to harvest it, right? Well, wouldn't you know it, but if you look at the essential elements of a nether fortress, those places that were constructed by the ancient builders as their home away from home as they explored the hostile underworld, you see bridges, a lava well room, and surprisingly, netherwort gardens. Gardens placed there to harvest the only crop that could be grown in such a hostile landscape. So we know that the builders were indeed harvesting the stuff, but then why is netherwort so important here? Well, we also know that the Minecraft universe is one where you quite literally are what you eat. In our Enderman video, I linked the ancient builders being forced to eat the End's native crop of chorus fruit, with them slowly obtaining the plant's teleportation abilities. And while yes, that was admittedly just speculation, we don't even have to go into the realm of theories to prove this one. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the mushroom, a cow mushroom hybrid that only spawns in mushroom field biomes, aka places where cows are consuming a diet primarily filled with mushrooms. Their milk is mushroom stew, their bodies are covered with the stuff, but we know at their core they began as regular cows, since when you shear them clean, it drops its mushrooms and transforms back into a normal bovine again. So if pigs in the nether were indeed subsisting off a diet entirely made of netherwort, there's a likelihood we could see some of that plant's traits carry over into this animal. Now, here's the thing about netherwort. Even though I just called it a plant, it looks and acts very much like a fungus. Netherwort grows through 4 stages, with the middle 2 stages looking nearly identical. It's a process that very closely resembles the life cycle of a typical mushroom. Netherwort is known as nether stalk in the code, just like many fungi are composed of the fruit body on top and the stalk underneath. It doesn't need sunlight to grow and instead thrives in the warm, dark environment of the nether, just like a real-world fungus. In fact, many of the Minecraft wikis equate netherwort to the real-world puffball fungus, which, although different in color, does indeed match in terms of design and reproductive behavior. And all of this matters because a diet of netherwort would explain how the zombie pigmen all share a psychic connection. You see, when we think of a fungus, we immediately think of the mushroom that's on top, but in reality, most of a fungus's body is made up of super thin threads known as mycelium. And the crazy thing is that these threads can go for dozens upon dozens of feet, connecting up with a bunch of other plants and fungi. So much so that researchers are now calling this an underground internet of sorts, a literal fungal network that's sharing information across plants, root to root, extending for miles. A wood wide web, if you will. Fungus expert Paul Stamets calls it Earth's natural internet in a 2008 TED Talk, and that fungal connection could very easily carry over into our pigs. Just like we see with mushrooms, eating that netherwort fungus could slowly transform our overworld pigs into an interconnected network of pig-fungus hybrids. And that's not all. Fungal networks also boost their host plants' immune systems. Simply plugging into the mycelial network makes plants more resistant to diseases. Now look at the netherwort. It's the essential ingredient for awkward potions, the base for over 90% of the game's magical abilities. You know what else is a key ingredient in potions? Glowstone dust, which is also found down in the nether. Potions, mind you, that bestow the drinker all sorts of magical properties, from greater defenses to greater swiftness to, most importantly, fire resistance. Fire resistance just like we see with the zombie piglins who are immune to fire and lava damage. In fact, this theory may even explain why we only see zombified versions of the pigmen and not normal style pigmen, the new piglin race excluded. Obviously, the ancient race of builders came to the nether a long time ago, and when their society collapsed, so did the coming and going from the overworld. As such, no new pigs were being brought into the nether, meaning that everyone we see down here has been down there for centuries at least. That, my friends, is some old rancid pork. So how could a pig survive for that long? Again, the netherwort's magical properties. One of its key uses is making potions of healing. It could be that the pigmen literally cannot die from natural causes, or just like the wither skeletons, were brought back to life with the strange soul-saving properties that exist in the nether. Heck, this theory may even explain why they only carry gold swords. Look at the types of loot that spawn inside the nether fortress chests, the ones containing supplies brought into the nether by the ancient builders. The only weapons that we ever see spawn in those chests are golden swords. That's it. That's what they brought in and stored in those chests. And since these are pigs at heart with no crafting ability, all the items that you find in there, like iron ingots and diamonds, are completely useless to them. The only thing that they can use to defend themselves is just what they found laying around in their natural environment, left behind by their former masters, the ancient, abandoned golden swords. So just look at all the questions this theory answers. It explains how pigs got into the Nether, why they'd be hostile to wither skeletons and have complicated feelings towards us as a descendant of the builders. It explains why we see netherwort purposely grown in the Nether fortresses, and how a diet of netherwort could produce a psychic link of sorts between all the pigmen in the region. That netherwort, combined with the local glowstone, because let's face it, pigs will eat, or at least try anything, could also explain their fire resistance, their zombification, and we even have ourselves an answer as to why they would all have golden butter swords, and only golden butter swords. Honestly, the only question I can answer about this mob is why they stand on two legs. Not 100% sure. Could be evolution. Pigs learning to walk upright to use their hands to defend themselves in the violent nether, while also wanting fewer body parts touching the hot netherrack. It's possible. But I do think that we're onto something with this theory. Something that I suspect Mojang might just want to be cluing us in on. Because if we go back to more of that Minecon footage, as they reveal the new biomes for the nether, one they spend a good amount of time on is the netherwort forest. And what do they explicitly show us wandering around in there? The only mob, mind you, that they show us in this preview, a zombie pigman wandering through the woods, at home amongst the food and landscape that helped to make him what he is. He's a pig, ripped from his comfortable life in the overworld, and brought down into the depths of heck to be used for the slaughter of the ancient people, but through random chance and a whole lot of fungus, becoming the start to a rival civilization bound for greatness, and then turning into zombies. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. Just a reminder to wave your right now.
My face hurts from laughing. Heart emoji. Heart emoji. Aww.
The best group chats happen in real life.
Emoji. He's so funny. I love you guys.
If you have tried multiple oral antidepressants,
the ocean. A beautiful blue crystal on this cuboidal planet we call home. Home to sea creatures large and small. The majestic squid, the playful dolphin.
The reborn souls of the dead waiting to drag into your watery grave!
All today on Game Theory.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, where today we're engaging in a very mature 13+ critical analysis of a fun for all ages game, Minecraft. Does that cover me? Not gonna get hit by any FTC fines, right? Here, let me throw in some big words just in case. Entrepreneurship, anti-disestablishmentarianism, fenestration, rampant consumerism. Hey, you know, speaking of rampant consumerism and that 2020 copper purge, if you want to help protect this channel while also showing your theorist pride and staying cozy this winter season, brand new Theoryware is available right now, right below this video. We've got everything from a glow-in-the-dark t-shirt to new lounge pants, a Nintendo Switch case, an awesome new flight jacket that combines a windbreaker and a hoodie, and even this little tube tumbler guy. You try to push him over, you can't knock him over. Anyway, items are starting to sell out, so if you have a theorist in your life that you want to get a cool holiday gift for, or if you just want to show your theorist pride yourself, check them out right now to ensure that you get yours in plenty of time before the holidays. Also, since we're doing quick update stuff, just a reminder that December 3rd is our big charity live stream in honor of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, which helps cure kids of cancer while also being a world leader in cancer research. And even though the stream might be happening on a Tuesday, it is going all day. So whenever you want to tune in, we'll be there waiting for you. And the big reveal of that new FNAF game is happening during the usual live stream time of 4:00 p.m. Pacific. So I hope to see all of you there at least at some point throughout the day. Scott Coffin literally just revealed on Reddit that the game is going to contain, get this, $500,000 for us to find. If we find it and claim it, then he'll donate it to St. Jude. So basically, the gauntlet has been thrown down for Dawko Markiplier and I. And the pressure is on for us to perform. The thing is gonna be a blast, and all of it is in honor of an incredible cause, so please try and make it so we can make the holidays just a bit brighter for some amazingly brave kids out there fighting for their lives. Alright, with all that housekeeping out of the way, let's talk some Minecraft, shall we? Today we're getting our Little Mermaid on and going down where it's wetter, down where it's better, under the sea. In Minecraft, the underwater biomes just don't seem to get enough love. Sure, everyone is always excited to make songs dedicated to the fiery death plains of the Nether, or to discuss the otherworldly void of the end, but the watery depths of the overworld offer just as many breathtaking sights, unusual creatures, and head-scratching mysteries, and yet no one really seems to care. It's kind of like art imitating life, because here in real life, we're so focused on space exploration that most of our undersea biomes here on Earth have gone completely unexplored. I think we've only seen like 5% of them. So today, I'm gonna change that. Not the 5% thing. Heck no, that water is cold. No, I'm just gonna sit on my butt and talk about oceans in a video game for about 18 minutes. What's the deal with the Guardians and the Elder Guardians? Where did they come from? Are they just giant fish creatures that really like hanging out in ocean monuments? Did they build the ocean monuments? Seems pretty unlikely. And speaking of those buildings, what's the deal with those massive underwater mazes? How do the drowned fit into all this? What are these trident-wielding mer people? Are they just zombies that fell into the water? Get ready to take the plunge, because today and next episode, we're diving straight into the deep end. What first started me down the path of ocean mysteries were the Guardians, and their bigger granddaddies, the Elder Guardians. From a mob standpoint, I mean, sure, they're giant sea creatures with one eye and spikes. Nothing super weird there right off the bat, but what initially got my theorist senses tingling was the way that they attack. With a literal laser beam, an underwater eye beam that requires time to charge up before it launches at you and causes massive amounts of damage. That's pretty weird for a fish, or really any sort of natural, organic, living creature. I mean, Minecraft is a game full of fantastical creatures, don't get me wrong, but attacking with eye laser cannons just felt out of place for me. So I just kept swimming, and stumbled across an even more unusual detail: their inability to die. You see, if you take a Guardian or Elder Guardian out of the water, it just flops around on the dry land, like a cubic Magikarp. But why this matters is what doesn't happen. You see, it doesn't suffocate when exposed to the air. It literally just keeps flopping around until you carve it up to make sushi. Well, it's just a video game mechanic, I hear you saying, and you'd be right if only other fish behaved the same way. For every other fish in the game, you take it out of the water, it flops around and eventually dies. Take a squid out of the water, it suffocates and dies. Take a salmon out of the water, it suffocates and dies. Take a pufferfish or a cod out of the water, they suffocate and they die. If you can't tell, there were a lot of cuboidal animals that were harmed during the production of this video. Anyway, the Guardians and the Elder Guardians are the only undersea creatures that can live indefinitely on the land. So between that and the laser eye thing, there was just something, pardon the pun, fishy about them. Or actually, that's completely the wrong pun, because it was something that didn't feel fishy about them. Something that felt a bit less like an animal and a bit more like a machine. Let's look closer at the design of the Guardian. Notice the colors of its flesh and the cracked patterns across its body. It's nearly identical to the prismarine blocks that form the ocean monument around them. Coincidence? I think not. And that isn't just my observation either. In Minecraft's official mob bestiary, the in-depth guide written from the perspective of an animal researcher in the Minecraft world, they specifically allude to this fact. Quote, their skin is cracked, as if carved from some ancient rock, and their single white eye is somehow both unknowable and... Watch it!
It's a night out with the girls, date night, or even just running errands, my daily routine is to use my prescription Upneek eye drops once.
Cruel. End quote. Ancient rock, you say? Like perhaps prismarine? The very same stone that serves as the primary building block for all ocean monuments? The only place in the game where they spawn? Further supporting the idea that the Guardians aren't made of flesh, but rather of prismarine stone is their drop behavior. When killed, the Guardian has a 40% chance of dropping prismarine crystal, which, for a fish, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, if you kill a sheep, it drops you wool. If you drop a cow, it drops you like cow flesh. But if you're a non-organic creature built from the nearby rocks and minerals, well, that could certainly explain a whole lot. And speaking of their drop behavior, the mob bestiary does a drop of its own. Another interesting tidbit about the Guardians. Quote again, Elder Guardians will also drop a water-absorbing sponge if killed by an adventurer. And if it doesn't drop a prismarine crystal, one will find raw fish of some kind in its place. Some scholars think that this is evidence that its diet consists of fish and other natural watery foodstuff, but Guardians have never been seen to wander far from their temple homes to catch them, so we cannot be sure. End end quote. It's an odd detail to include there at the end, right? To specifically call out, hey, they drop fish, meaning that they might eat fish, but, you know, considering the fact that they never leave the ocean monuments they spawn in, they probably don't eat the fish. Again, all the evidence seems to be pointing to these creatures not being animals, as I'm sure we've all assumed them to be, but rather some sort of artificial creation. A defense mechanism built of the surrounding materials somehow mixed with real-life fish, or real-life fish DNA to protect the very monument that they spawn inside. Even the creature's anatomical design inside the mob bestiary seems to contain some level of secrets. For most other mobs in the game, the book has this incredible illustration of their inner workings. The dense skeletons of the creeper, the humanoid brains of the Enderman. But for the Elder Guardian, we get ourselves a piece-by-piece dissection of the eye, with components that look kinda like wires, leading to panels meant to charge up its laser. And underneath that thick, rocky skin, nothing much. A thin layer of pink with a gray area that appears to be stone. It's certainly not any sort of bony structure. It's not anything that resembles the inner workings of a fish, and it's certainly not anything that looks remotely organic. Lastly, it's worth noting that the Elder Guardian's eye will still have the ability to track a player who's invisible, seeming to suggest that this mob is dealing in the thermal spectrum, tracking your heat signature rather than any sort of visual sign of your movement patterns. So again, another weird, interesting detail about these creatures. I mean, even the name seems to allude to it, Guardian. Considering they only spawn inside ocean monuments and they're called guardians, if they were indeed man-made, well, clearly they were made to act as some sort of security mechanism. But then, what are they supposed to be protecting? Well, despite ocean monuments being massive complexes, there's really only two unusual rooms worth calling out inside of them: the sponge room and the treasure room. The first is fairly self-explanatory. It's the sponge room. It is a room full of sponges. There's not much more to say there. I'm personally more of a loofah man myself, but still, it's odd that whoever built this enormous building deemed it necessary to dedicate a room to this one oddly specific item. More on that in a minute, because it's the treasure room that I think the Guardians want to focus on. You see, while every monument may not necessarily contain itself a sponge room, all monuments do contain themselves a treasure chamber, a central area with a tall ceiling and 8 gold blocks located in the middle. Gold blocks that are encased or hidden behind a layer of dark prismarine. And it's this right here that is perhaps the most oddly specific design choice hidden in the entire game. Here we are in the middle of this massive underwater complex made entirely of one material. Just varieties of prismarine everywhere. That's it. And yet, smack in the middle, the designers decide to include this massive golden box. Alright, that alone would make some kind of sense, I guess. Displaying your prized treasure like it's a core to the entire building, but it's the fact that the gold is hidden under another layer. That the gold is literally encased within a box of dark prismarine, within a box of another stone hidden away, that really strikes me as noteworthy here. And it's those details, coupled with the overall design of the structure, that leads me to believe that the ocean monuments were made to be religious buildings. First, let's just start by looking at the overall design of the ocean monument. It's a classic ziggurat structure, a staircase-like building with wide flat landings that get narrower each level up. Basically, it's like a big pyramid, but with some stopping points as you get higher, whereas a more traditional pyramid, like those in Egypt, consist of a smooth, continuous line all the way to the peak. Ziggurats were famous in ancient Mesopotamia, basically the first place you learn about in world history class and never fully understand or care about. Cradle of civilization, have no idea what that is. Let's just get to ancient Greece and Egypt already. Those are the cool ones. Or at least that's how I felt when I was learning those units. So I went back, refreshed myself on all that information, and let me clear it up for you. Mesopotamia back in the day was where modern-day Iraq and part of Syria are today. So basically, it's an ancient civilization located in the Middle East. That is where you would find structures like the one that we see depicted here in Minecraft. So, knowing the real-life structure that these monuments are based on, we can start to get clues as to what their intended use was in the Minecraft lore. You see, in ancient Mesopotamia, a ziggurat's main purpose was religious. It was meant to connect heaven and earth. They're thought to have been built to literally house the gods. As such, only priests were allowed to get inside of the ziggurats. And this hypothetical religious use seems to be supported by Minecraft. You see, one other key feature of the ocean monument is the fact that underneath the monument are 23 giant pillars that stretch down to the ocean floor. And it's always 23, unless of course there's some weird spawn hiccup. But that 23 number, I've said it so many times this episode, it seems so oddly specific, right? It has got to mean something. And wouldn't you know it, I think it does. You see, the number 23 is just one of those numbers that's considered to be really important to humans. It's a prime number, which already makes it special. It's the number of chromosomes chromosome pairs that we have in our body. It's basketball star Michael Jordan's number. There's a really bad Jim Carrey movie all about the number 23. So, you know, really important stuff here. But all joking aside, there's even something called the 23 Enigma, essentially a belief that the number has some sort of magical or mystical significance because of how much it shows up in our day-to-day lives. So when it comes to numbers, 23 is kind of a big deal, just behind top 10, lucky 7, and I guess unlucky 13. But when it comes to religion, 23 is an even bigger deal. You see, in the Islamic faith, there's the Quran. It's the Islamic sacred book, just like Christians have themselves the Bible and Judaism has the Torah. The Quran is believed to be the word of God as dictated to the Prophet Muhammad. And it took, get this, 23 years for the entire book to be revealed to Muhammad. It's also Muslim belief that the first verses of the Quran were revealed to the Prophet Muhammad on the 23rd night of the 9th Islamic month. So again, in the Islamic faith, the number 23 matters a lot, meaning that those 23 pillars in the Minecraft Ocean Monument could very easily be referencing important pieces of religious architecture found around the Middle East. No, ziggurats aren't mosques, where Islamic faith is currently practiced, but they are connected by geographic region and religious connotation. Now here is where everything comes together. If Minecraft's ocean monuments were indeed places of religious significance, where an ancient race of people believed gods could come down onto the earth and live, it could explain the box of gold encased in dark prismarine with sea lanterns in each of its corners. But to understand why, you have to be familiar with the Kaaba. The Kaaba is a black cube building at the center of Islam's most important mosque, the Great Mosque of Mecca. It is the most important place in the Islamic faith, so important that practitioners of Islam are almost required to take a pilgrimage to see this once in their life and give worship there. Why? Well, it's thought that the Kaaba is the house of God, the sacred house, the connection between heaven and the earth. The Kaaba is a sacred place with an inside of gold and marble, but on the outside, it appears to just be a large black cube of dark granite, just like we see in the game with the dark prismarine being on the outside of those golden cubes. In each of the corners in Minecraft is a sea lantern, and wouldn't you know it, each corner of the Kaaba also has itself a special symbolic significance, most often pointing to one key location from Islamic history. So could it be that the guardians of Minecraft are protecting the most sacred treasure of all, the location, or at least the perceived location, of God himself? It sounds crazy, but remember, the ending of Minecraft does indeed have two godlike figures speaking with each other about your gameplay. The fact that gods exist in the canonical universe of Minecraft is an established part of the lore. I mean, a lot of the details really line up here. The ziggurat structure connects us to the Middle East and Islamic tradition. The 23 pillars and their importance to Islamic faith, covering up the golden, important interior of a building with a dark stone exterior just like the Kaaba. The perfect cubic shape of both of those structures. The importance of each of the corners. The need to have the guardians protecting this place at all. Heck, even the name. This is the Ocean Monument. It isn't a ruin, it's not a temple, it's a monument. Monument is a word used to honor a place of historical significance, a place of the dead, or an important figure like a god. You don't call the building that houses your sponge room a monument. Oh yeah, and it's worth mentioning here as one last final note, the one practical function of the ziggurat was actually to serve as just a high place on which the priests could escape rising water that would flood the Mesopotamian areas every year. Rising water, huh? Maybe the underwater monuments weren't quite so underwater. So we have ourselves the heat-seeking laser-shooting fish that might have been man-made to protect an underwater monument dedicated to what may or may not be an ancient god. Now the only question is, who built it? Why is it here underwater? And that, my friends, is explained through two words: the drowned. But that theory will have to wait for another day. In the meantime, remember, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Ron Ferguson took the paycheck, but missed the work. Ferguson missed over 175.
Waves are not measured in feet or inches. They're measured in increments of fear. The ocean is an object of no small terror. There are three sorts of people: those who are alive, those who are dead, and those who are at sea. Hello, Internet, welcome to Game Theory, where first off, thank you for showing up in force to our St. Jude charity livestream last week. With your help, we were able to raise $1,330,000 for children with childhood cancer. $1.3 million in just 10 hours of time. That is money that is going to a purely good cause, saving the lives of children and kicking cancer's butt once and for all. I know we said it a lot during the live stream, but in case you weren't there,
thank you guys, it's really awesome. It makes such a difference.
It's literally buying back the lives of children.
All this money that is being raised right now is going to save more kids that are coming to the doors to St. Jude.
So thank you guys. Thank you for being there. Thank you for showing the world that being a YouTuber or being a fan of YouTube, being a gamer, none of those things have to be dirty words. That is the power of communities united to make a change. And that's pretty darn incredible. And then, along with raising that amazing amount of money, I also got myself dunked, egged, and shaved by some of my best friends both on and off YouTube. All in all, it was pretty amazing across the board. So thank you for being there, and thank you for helping to make December 3rd the single proudest day of my YouTube career. So now let's talk about pirates. Yarr!
There's so much data. We'll be building models all night.
Nope. I'm using Sasphiah to build models and make decisions. We're done.
So you don't want these 15 pizzas?
Nobody said that.
The pizzas stay. This is their home now.
From data to ta-da, Sasphiah.
You see, last time we started our deep dive into the underwater mysteries of Minecraft's overworld, we first turned our attention to the Guardian and Elder Guardian mobs, pointing out that they definitely don't seem to be organic fish-like creatures. From their bodies composed of prismarine block to their inability to suffocate when left on land, from dropping crystals to launching eye lasers with decidedly non-fishy anatomy, these creatures of the deep appear to be more man-made than fish-made, almost as if they were intended to be a security device for the ocean monuments that they call their home, which obviously then led us to start exploring the ocean monuments. Buildings that, at least in my estimation, appear to have religious significance. The ziggurat-style architecture, the 23 support columns, the mysterious cube of gold hidden in the middle of the building, all of it pointing towards some sort of memorial dedicated to honoring a higher power. But you'll notice that during that last episode, I left things on a bit of a cliffhanger, leaving one key question unanswered. Who made these things? If the Guardians and the Elder Guardians are some sort of machine or security device, well, someone must have created them. Same thing with the ocean monument. If these massive structures really were built as religious structures for god worship, well, who built them to worship those gods in the first place? The answer might at first seem pretty obvious, right? The drowned, the underwater zombies that swim around throwing their tridents at you and making underwater exploration just a big ol' headache. Because they're the only humanoids underwater, it seems like it clearly must be them, right? And it is! Or at least it's my theory that they're the ones who built these structures, but not for the reasons that you would expect. You see, there's a lot to show the history of the drowned, their connection to these monuments, and how they became the drowned in the first place. Spoiler alert, these guys aren't just zombies who fell into the water, even if that's one of the ways that they spawn nowadays. No, the drowned were, at least at one point in their history, land-faring people, who, like so many of the other mobs in Minecraft, underwent a horrific catastrophe. But to see why and what it was, let's start at the end of our story and work backwards. To begin, how could we possibly know that it was the drowned who built the ocean monuments and the guardians that protect them? Two major reasons. First, the drowned are immune to guardian and elder guardian attacks. If the guardians are indeed protecting a holy sanctuary, well, you'd assume they'd protect it from all different types of intruders, not just us as the player. And yet, the drowned mob gets a pass in the eyes, or should I say the eye of the guardian. This only makes sense if the drowned are somehow connected to the monument and or the initial construction of those guardians. It would be pretty darn stupid to install a security system and then not write in an exception for you and the people that you trust. This tells us then that the drowned are approved to come and go as they please, while outsiders, like us as the player character, are actively discouraged from sneaking in and desecrating this ancient place of worship. Our second key piece of evidence is gold. Now, we already covered last episode the mysterious blocks of of gold found hidden in the middle of the ocean monuments. This, in and of itself, is bizarre, since the entire rest of the structure is just varieties of prismarine block and sea lantern. But if you look at other ruins left behind under the ocean and the loot that is found inside of those ruins, you see it again. More gold. Gold in the form of nuggets, gold in the form of apples, gold in the form of helmets. So gold and underwater structures seem to be connected, and wouldn't you know it, gold also happens to be one of the 4 drop items of the Drowned, with the other 3 being rotten flesh, tridents, and nautilus shells. And this gold connection immediately differentiates the Drowned from normal zombies. Normal zombies sink when they're put underwater, and they drop not gold, but iron. So even though Drowned do spawn from zombies that are dropped in the water, that isn't where their origin story lies, at least from a lore perspective. And that's the story that I'm most interested in today. So between being given security clearance by the Guardians, as well as being the only underwater creatures carrying a key resource that's found inside those structures, as well as their chests, seems pretty darn clear like the Drowned are builders. It also begins to tell us that the Drowned, as well as all these underwater buildings, might not have always been underwater. Look closer at the ocean ruin loot lists. What do you see stand out? Wheat and rotten flesh. Food was being stored inside of these chests for the people who once lived here. The meat has been kept in the chest for so long that it's gotten rotten, and the wheat, well, it just doesn't really go bad in this game. But if the Drowned truly did build these structures, which it seems like they did, why would underwater zombie creatures need food? Heck, why would any underwater society, living or dead, be growing and storing wheat in its chests? Which, in case you know nothing about farming, is definitely not an underwater crop. This thing ain't no cranberry. Let's put a pin in that, because now let's look at the ocean monuments. I made a joke last episode about the monuments tending to spawn with sponge rooms built into them. Huge rooms with bunches of wet sponges just hanging on the ceiling. Haha, isn't that weird? Insert joke about a loofah room, let's talk about religion the rest of the episode. But what I glossed over for the sake of the time last episode, and what I want to point out now, is that those aren't just naturally occurring sponges. It's not like you wander around the ocean monument and just find sponges in the environment around you. No, these are dedicated rooms for housing the sponge as a unique resource. Now, for those of you who don't know the specific use of a sponge in Minecraft, it can suck up to 65 water blocks before becoming a wet and therefore useless sponge. It's most often used for drying out areas of the map, but again, why would an underwater civilization, an underwater ruin, need a storehouse of things used for sucking up water? The answer is, it doesn't. An underwater ruin doesn't need anything like that. But a ruin that's above the ground and starting to sink under the water absolutely does. So what am I trying to say? What happened here? What does some wheat and some sponges tell us about this civilization? Well, the evidence seems to suggest that we have ourselves a civilization that started on the surface, but that eventually got washed under the water. The question then becomes whether this was the result of a major natural disaster like a tsunami, or just slowly rising tides. To me, I'd say it was that latter option. The fact that sponges were being used in the ocean monument as a means of keeping it dry suggests that they were trying to prolong the drowning of everything as long as possible before it became too late. On a side note here, I know that there's a larger Minecraft theory out there that members of the fanbase have had for years, where the whole Minecraft story is the end result of global warming, and while I'm not covering that particular theory today, you can definitely chalk the ocean monuments and the rising tides that swallowed the drowned civilization as pretty darn strong evidence supporting that hypothesis. But we're still not done, because the story of the drowned and their buildings doesn't just stop there. You see, the drowned didn't just dab a few sponges around and call it a day when they saw their world slowly being swallowed up by the powers of Neptune himself. If we look at the evidence, we learn every step of their story. A story that, like so many of the other mobs in this game, is a tragic one. One of desperately trying to survive in the face of certain death, and those hopes of survival ultimately being dashed like waves along the rocks. This, my friends, is the complete story of the Drowned. The Drowned began on land as a normal seafaring civilization of fishermen and pirates. We know this because of their natural affinity with water, as well as the fact that they spawn equipped with both fishing rods and tridents, two common tools for ancient fishermen. And yes, although they've now been replaced with fishing spears, tridents were indeed an old school fishing tool used in ancient Greece as like a harpoon for nabbing some fish kebabs. That's why you always see Poseidon and Neptune depicted with a trident. Cue the more you know graphic. I say that this ancient civilization were pirates as well because the drowned mob is hostile towards villagers and wandering traders. This seems to indicate that a large part of their old culture culture involved raiding villages for their various supplies, and just old habits die hard. The loot you find in ocean ruin chests also seems to support this. Whereas most other chests throughout the game in places like the Nether Fortresses or the End have very consistent materials telling a very clear story of where a society was at a certain point in time and what resources they had to get there, the ocean ruin chests are kinda filled with a mishmash of stuff. You got some coal, gold, emeralds, some stone items mixed in there for some reason, leather. It's almost as if they've been taking whatever supplies they can grab from lots of different places around the world and just shoving them in their chests. Plus, I gotta admit, the drowned are hostile towards baby turtles, and no one nice is hostile towards baby turtles, so they gotta be pirates. Putting aside the pirate business, we know for sure that they were a fishing and water-based culture that also happened to be deeply religious. But then the waters started to rise. Sure, they tried their best to hold back the floods using sponges, but it clearly wasn't enough. The waters weren't receding. If nothing was done, their whole world would be swallowed up by the very oceans their livelihoods were dependent upon. So they did what they know best. Their best fishermen took off into the ocean. Why? Because they were in search for one thing, the heart of the sea. Notice inside ocean ruin chests that there's one additional item that really stands out, the buried treasure map. Now, this is important. There are 3 types of maps in the game of Minecraft: ocean, woodland, and buried treasure. The first 2 are fairly standard. They're sold by pretty much any cartographer. But the last one, the buried treasure map, can only be found in the remnants of the drowned civilization, underwater ruins, and shipwrecks. And that shipwreck detail is important. It tells us that these fishermen went out into the oceans on their boats, carrying these maps, looking for the treasure that was hidden on those maps. Now, buried treasure in Minecraft is pretty interesting. It can include everything from TNT to cake to chainmail armor. Basically, lots of different items can all be found inside of these hidden chests. And, like all buried treasure, most of the stuff you're gonna find is gonna be common, boring, everyday items that could probably just as easily have been crafted or bought at a store. But there's one unique item that can only be found inside these buried treasure chests: the heart of the sea. I suspect that this item was a bit of a myth to the drowned civilization, an old fisherman's tale about some mysterious object, an all-powerful blue pearl that could somehow allow a person to be master of the waves. I mean, consider this. In the game, the heart of the sea only has one functional use: building conduits. These conduits bestow the effect Conduit Power, an area of effect status boost that gives anyone in the area who's touching water the skills of water breathing, night vision, and haste. 3 skills that would be pretty darn essential for a society frantically rushing to fight against the rising tides. Water breathing to survive the suffocating waves, night vision to work around the clock, making darkness just as productive as the day, and haste to speed up the building process as time continues to tick down and as the tides continue to rise. This was their hope, to find the mysterious and super rare heart of the sea object, the one thing that they believed could save them. And with the waters quickly rising into their homes, there was no place left to turn, no other solution. They had to find this object, myth or otherwise. So they sent out their ships by the hundreds, carrying their maps and fishing gear, desperately searching the waves, knowing that the lives of their loved ones hang in the balance. And as you can imagine, many aren't able to survive the journey. You'll notice that there are many shipwrecks sprinkled along the bottom of the ocean, broken husks of boats that contain those treasure maps, ships wrecked upon the rocks, or sucked down by whirlpools in the sea. Meanwhile, those left at home collect nautilus shells, the other ingredient necessary to build those conduits, ready to make the conduit once one person, one sailor, finds that elusive heart of the sea, but it never comes. No one ever discovers it. Help never arrives back home. That's why we never find a naturally existing conduit in the world. And so this fishing society sinks. Their buildings and monuments get swallowed by the waves. The fishermen cast out and buried in the sea. They become, literally, the drowned. As without the conduit's power, they choke on the waters of the ocean. They become the undead that continue to haunt and fish in bodies of water to this day. That's why they swim at our speed. They don't have the power of haste. That's why they still carry their nautilus shells, waiting and ready for when someone finally finds that one last item that could have saved them. It's also why, when you, as the player, are finally able to find that heart of the sea and construct a conduit, the name of the achievement is an odd one. Muskströmmen, the name of one of the world's strongest tidal currents that's located in Norway. It's odd, right? But in English, it's translated as the Maelstrom, a body of water so violent, so turbulent that it inspired countless fictional authors. It's the raging currents that swallowed up Captain Nemo and Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It's mentioned by Captain Ahab and Herman Melville's Moby Dick, and it's here in Minecraft as an achievement for doing what the drowned could never do: survive the maelstrom of the rising waters, the waves that would rip apart a society, and finally conquer the waves. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. What are the Illagers doing in that dank, secluded mansion of theirs, with its redstone jails, elaborate altars, and hidden rooms housing strange obsidian structures? It really seems like they're plotting something. That is a quote from Marsh Davies, former creative communications manager for Mojang, in his introduction to the Evoker mob back when it was introduced in 2017. It's a line that is outright challenging us. It's telling us there's something hidden within the walls of the Illagers' Woodland Mansion compound. There's a mystery to be solved out there in those dark forests. One that, according to my research, has gone unanswered that entire time. But now, 3 years later, I think I've done it. I think I know what the Illagers are doing out there. And more importantly, I think I know what they're planning. Let's just say, after today's video, you will never look at Minecraft the same way again. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the most bingeable show on YouTube for all those times when you find yourself inexplicably stuck inside with nothing else to do. Speaking of bingeable content, over the last year, we've been mining for nuggets of lore to craft together a massive overarching theory on the story of Minecraft. I'll link to all those theories right there in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. I recommend starting with our analysis of the Enderman, as well as this one covering the origins of the drowned civilization. Here's the thing though, up until this point, you as the viewer, and quite honestly me too, have been uncertain what, if anything, has actually been planned by the Mojang team working on Minecraft.